Recording in progress.
I hope you're enjoying your reading of Romeo and Juliet. This is for Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 4. Where are we at? Maybe it would help to get a big picture. Sorry, let me go back to this first one here. Remember, the Act 2 starts off with Romeo having left the party but doesn't want to leave the Capulet home because he wants to see Juliet and profess his love. And sure enough, that's what happens in Scene 2. Both of them are ready to commit to marriage. And we see that at Juliet's window. Romeo goes straight to Friar Lawrence to see if he will wed the two. And Friar Lawrence readily agrees because he thinks that it will join the two families, that it will be a balm. Now remember, we've already been presented with lots of contrast in this play, right? Opposites. So it could be a balm, it could be an answer, it could be a way to bring peace and harmony amongst their families. It could. Wouldn't that be great? So the friar is thinking very positively about this. Well, the contrast of that would be that it blows up in their face and it is not a balm. It does not bring harmony. So that's the plan right now, is Friar Lawrence is going to marry the two, and then Romeo he's flying high. He is happy. He's going to get married to the woman that he loves. He is filled with joy, and he's back. The old Romeo, the moping Romeo, the sad, sorry, pathetic, hide in my room and shut the curtain so I can cry and mope Romeo, that's gone. And he is going to join back up with his friends in Scene 4. That is where we are at. And just to get to that scene, there we go, Scene 4. His two buddies, if you recall, are Mercutio and Benvolio. So Mercutio is very much a strong character, very vocal, probably like a kind of a companion character to the nurse. Tells stories and jokes and plays fun on their friends, where the nurse kind of plays fun on Juliet in just a little bit. We're going to see that. Mercutio is full of words, and Romeo actually says something about how he says nothing, actually. He runs his mouth. That's what he does. That's at the end of Scene 4 here. But we start off with Mercutio and Benvolio. And they're at the beginning of the scene, they're talking about, where has Romeo been? Where could he be? They don't know yet that he is in love with Juliet. And Benvolio shares that Tybalt has sent a letter, a challenge, if you will, to the Montagues. Why would Tybalt want to challenge Romeo? Well, the night before at the party, Romeo showed up uninvited, crashed the party. Tybalt knew it. And if you remember, Lord Capulet put him in his place. He didn't want any violence at his house. But Tybalt has not put it aside. He's mad. He is angry. So he has sent a challenge to Romeo. So this is like a challenge of a duel or challenge of a fight, if you will. Mercutio laughs, a challenge on my life. Romeo will answer it, says Benvolio. And here's just an example of what Mercutio is like. He just plays with words. Any man that can write may answer a letter. Well, we all know, the reader knows, Benvolio knows, it's not about answering the letter, it's about answering the challenge. Benvolio says, nay, he will answer the letter's master, how he dares being dared. And Mercutio says, poor Romeo is already dead. How is Romeo already dead? So here we have this theme of death again, right? But this is a joke. Romeo is dead. What does he mean? That Cupid has already shot Romeo in the heart, right? So here's an image of that event. Romeo has been slain by Cupid. And he kind of laughs. He's like, okay, wait a minute. This is Romeo, who's been shot in the heart by Cupid. Thank you. And he says, and this is the man who should encounter Tybalt Are you kidding me? Romeo is just a sad sack. He's moping about women, and he's the guy that should encounter Tybalt. Probably Mercutio feels like I'm the guy that could fight Tybalt. And then Volio was like, well, what is Tybalt? Again, there's another question of ontology. Like, what is Tybalt? Well, we know he's a Capulet, and we know he's hot-headed, don't we? Now, Mercutio's response is very confusing. Let me just kind of give you the big picture. First of all, he calls Tybalt the Prince of Cats. Now, if you were the original audience, say you're a groundling and you're at the stage, you're at the Globe Theater, you're watching this performed, and Mercutio calls Tybalt the Prince of Cats, you immediately would have recalled a story that you would have been told or read to or seen acted out of, I don't know how to say it, Renaud, this trickster fox character. And so this is a source story where you have this trickster fox, Renaud, I think is how you would say his name. And he would mock and play jokes on a cat named Tybalt. And so Tybalt in this original source story is kind of this character who's mocked, who's gullible, who's vain, who's kind of a bumbling character, and always gets kind of tricked by Renaud, the fox. And so Mercutio calls him the Prince of Cats. There's also some ill meaning in the word cats in Italian. So he's being kind of crude about Tybalt, calling him a name. And he's going to make fun of him. He's the courageous captain of compliments. That alliteration is kind of alerting us to the fact that he's joking about Tybalt. He fights as you sing prick song. Okay, so he's going to use a lot of language that is going to be dueling terminology. And also he pairs that with this musical. So you can just see Tybalt, this foolish character who takes his fighting very seriously. He's probably a precise swordsman. He's doing all of the moves exactly as a gentleman would do. And that's what Mercutio is saying. He's using all kinds of dualist language and kind of elevating Tybalt as this man who's a bit of a fop, which is a fool. We'll take look at a picture of that in a minute. And Benvolio says the what? And Mercutio kind of keeps talking about Tybalt. And he's just kind of this character. Well, we can look at the picture. This is a picture from the sewing catalog of a costume for Renaissance period. But Mercutio is saying that he's a fop. And a fop would be a fool. That's what it would mean to a medieval. But also you get this idea of a dandy, somebody who cares about fashion. He even kind of calls him a woman a little bit here. He cares more about fashion and looking the part. So he's kind of attacking his manhood, if you will. He's not a real fighter. He's not a real man. He's just this foolish dandy who dresses up in fancy clothes and struts around, acting like he's all that. That's what Mercutio is doing. So as they're bantering back and forth and Mercutio's making fun of Tybalt, Romeo enters the scene. And Mercutio is just going to keep on playing the jokes. And now he turns his attention to Romeo. This is confusing language. Remember before he was calling Romeo and he's like, give me a poem, sing me as a love song, right? And he was saying something that rhymes with love and dove. He was making fun of Romeo. He's going to do the same thing right here. He says, now is he for the numbers. So numbers would be poetry that Petrarch flowed in. So that's that Petrarch, kind of that Petrarchan poetry of love, right? And Petrarch would write about Laura, his lady, or it wasn't his lady, a lady that he loved, that he was striving after. And then Mercutio is just going to list a bunch of women in classical mythology and in stories. So Dido, Cleopatra, Helen, Hero, Thisbe, all of these women who have probably been anthologized in poetry. is what he's saying. So here he is. He's going to come and he's going to give us a poem. So he's making fun of Romeo. He's not being serious at all. Well, before Romeo, when he responded to Mercutio doing that, he would slink away. He didn't partake. He didn't join the party. He didn't play Mercutio's verbal bantering game. But in this scene, Romeo is on top of his game, and he is going to give it right back to Mercutio. So as you read this scene, you're not going to understand every single word, and there's some helps for you in your book. You can look at that. Here's the deal. They're bantering back and forth. They're doing guy talk. Some of it's a little bit of locker room talk, maybe you would describe. Crude, not as elevated and poetic as his language to Juliet. They're bantering back and forth as guys. And Mercutio loves it. So by the time you get to line 85, you can just picture him smacking Romeo in the chest. This is better. You're back. This is the man I want to see. Isn't this better than groaning for love? Now you're sociable. Now you're the Romeo that we know. That's what he's saying. Now art thou what thou art, by art as well as by nature. For this driveling love is like a great natural. So natural would be a word for a fool that runs lolling up and down to hide in a hole. All right, so he's like, yes, this is so much more fun than when you're sad and miserable over a girl. You're with your buddies. We get to laugh and have fun. Okay, that's what's happening in this scene. Don't stress or fret if you can't really understand what every single sentence in their conversation is. If you can just grab the big picture, they're bantering back and forth. Mercutio is so happy to see that Romeo's back. He's back to the good old Romeo. Okay, as they're bantering and they're talking back and forth, notice that Benvolio is not really in this banter. Mercutio is kind of a crude character, a character that is probably unbridled a little bit. That kind of idea has come up a little bit before, whereas Benvolio isn't. Benvolio is a man of peace. Benvolio presents himself, I think, with a little bit more nobility in this play. So they're kind of like opposites, if you will, like a contrast. Well, as they're bantering back and forth, and this is a humorous scene, the nurse and her servant, Peter, start walking up towards the group of men. The nurse is looking for Romeo. Why would she be looking for Romeo? If you remember, Juliet said, I will send word to you, and then you tell me, are we going to meet? Are we going to get married? Should I come to the friars? What time should I come? So the nurse, sure enough, is on her way to find Romeo. And Mercutio says, a sail, a sail. Okay, this tricked me for a little bit. I was like, what does he mean? And then I remembered the nautical language from before. And what he's doing is he's saying, a ship, a ship. That's what he's saying. Look, a ship is coming our way. It's the nurse. And when you think about the big picture of the play and the beginning, that idea of star-crossed lovers, that he's on a journey. Romeo said to Juliet, if you were far across the sea, I would go on an adventure. I would venture out to find you. And that's essentially what's happening. He's on this journey, this adventure. And he even says in the beginning, before he goes into the party, something, I wish I knew my part, but something about may he who steers my course, right, direct my sails. And you get this idea that that they're on a ship, and this could land safely in the harbor, or it could all end very badly in a shipwreck. And the prologue of the opening of the play already tells us what's going to happen. So anyway, Mercutio's having fun. He says, a ship, a ship. Benvolio says there's two, a shirt and a smock, a guy and a woman, right? And it's the nurse. And she's a funny character. Give me my fan, Peter. She says, and Mercutio makes fun of her to hide her face, for her fan is the fairer face. Her fan is better looking than the nurse. And the nurse and Mercutio, they're going to spar. They're going to have words. He probably has met his match in the nurse, and she thinks he is a spicy young man and does not care for him. And that's what you're going to read before Mercutio goes off stage. And the nurse talks to Romeo. A saucy merchant. I wonder if that merchant word is nautical as well. I pray you, sir, what saucy merchant was this? She doesn't like Mercutio. And Romeo says he loves to hear himself talk. And we'll speak more in a minute, but he will stand in a month. That tells you a little bit something about Mercutio. The nurse, there's a couple interesting things I want to point out, and then you're free to read it on your own and kind of keep in mind some of the things we've said here. The nurse says, before God, I'm so vexed, she says. Pray you, sir, a word. As I told you, my young lady bid me inquire you out. What she bid me say, I will keep to myself. But first, let me tell you, if you should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say, it were a very gross kind of behavior, as they say, for the gentlewoman is young. So she's kind of warning Romeo, don't mess with my girl. She's young, and therefore, if you should deal double with her, truly it were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing. She wants to make it very clear, don't mess with Juliet. And Romeo says, nurse, commend me to thy lady and mistress. I protest unto thee. And the word protest here means I swear. I swear to you. And she grabs onto this really quickly. She sees this as a vow. Oh, good heart, and in faith I will tell her as much. Lord, Lord, she will be a joyful woman. What will you tell her, nurse? Thou dost not mark me. And the nurse says, I will tell her that you do protest, you swear, which, as I take it, is a gentleman-like offer. She takes it as an offer of marriage. And Romeo says, bid her devise some means to come to shrift this afternoon, to come to confession. Have her figure out how she can get to the church to confess. And there she shall, at Friar Lawrence's cell, be shrived and married. Here is for thy pains. All right, so they're going to work out the details. Romeo says, my man is going to come and bring you a ladder. It's a top-gallant, so a ship ladder. Interesting. That they can put up outside Juliet's window, so after they're married, they can be together. So that's kind of the details where we leave it off. And the nurse is pleased with this, which is cool. There's a couple things that right here at the very end of scene 4 that are worth marking. So you can have your book open, take some notes, or just remember this or as you read the end. She's quite a talker, this nurse, and she says, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Oh, Lord. Lord, when she was little, she was a little prattling thing. And then she tells Romeo, there's a nobleman in town, one Paris, that would fain lay knife aboard. There's a man in town, Paris, who would like to marry her. But she, good soul, had as like to see a toad, a very toad, as see him. I anger her sometimes and tell her that Paris is the properer man. But I'll warrant you when I say she looks as pale as any clout in the verse of the world. And then she says this, doth not Rosemary and Romeo begin both with a letter? Kind of a weird thing to say. Rosemary starts with an R. Romeo starts with an R. Well, Romeo says, yeah, nurse. Well, what if that? Both with an R. Okay. And then she's joking with him and she goes, arr, mocker. That's the dog's name. Arr. R is for the, oh, no, I know it begins with some other letter. And she had the prettiest. Okay, so she's just talking. She's saying that my charge, Juliet, talks about Rosemary when she talks about you. So what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Rosemary is a plant, and try to remember what the friar was doing. He was gathering plants, gathering herbs, right? So rosemary has some significance. So in the medieval world, rosemary was used for all kinds of things. It was used to put into a bridal wreath, or if a woman was going to wear a floral or like some kind of headpiece, they would put rosemary in it. It meant good fortune. They would carry rosemary in their bridal bouquets, and it equated marital happiness, right? It was like a good luck. Like rosemary had this beautiful meaning for marriage, for weddings. Well, as in all things in this play, there are double meanings and there are contrasts. Rosemary also was used for funerals. It was an ancient practice to take rosemary sprigs and put them in the hands of the deceased. And then the mourners who would follow behind in a funeral procession would carry the rosemary and they would throw it into the grave for burial. So here you get this picture. It's just a throwaway word, kind of, right? Didn't that Rosemary and Romeo begin both with the same letter? All right, so she's linking this idea of rosemary, which is packed full of wedding imagery and funeral imagery, and pairing it with Romeo. And you get this two sides of a coin here. There could be a wedding. It could be beautiful. It could bring harmony. It could bring peace. It could bring joy. It could unite the families. It could extinguish the hatred, right? So that wedding could kind of represent that, but it could also represent death. And since we've seen death over and over and over and over again, and because we read the prologue, we know what's going to happen, right? So just a little interesting thing that Shakespeare has done with this image of rosemary. It's packed full of meaning for the Romeo and Juliet story. And that's the end of scene 4. We are almost done. I think there's 6 scenes all total, but they're short. So we'll do a quick scene for scene 5 and scene 6, and then we'll discuss this story in class. I hope you're enjoying it. God bless, and we will see ya Thursday. If I can figure out how to end, here we go. I've done this a million times. You think I'd figure it out by now. There we go.